Good evening and welcome back at it here with another edition of the 2D podcast, episode number 28. We've got to decide a couple of things here. Number one, we got to figure out, are we going to, with the new league year, make it season 2 of podcast? I don't know, something that is going to have to be figured out here pretty soon, the new league year approaching. News to cover here on the 2D podcast. Brian Flores landing with the Pittsburgh Steelers, assistant head coach and linebackers coach with the Steelers. However, Eric Bieniemy, still no landing spot. No word on whether or not he'll be back with the Kansas City Chiefs. 9 new head coaches. Who's going to be a success? Who's going to be a failure? We'll give you our list. I got them ranked 1 through 9. At least I've got them ranked 1 through 9. Aaron Rodgers. Wow, he finally spoke again and said nothing. I really want to get to the bottom of what it was. Jeff is going to tell us what all has he been doing. What is he getting his head above the sand on? I look forward to Jeff explaining that to me. Rams coaching staff being rated yet again. And if there's time, is there time? If there's time, is it a problem that there's no consensus number 1 pick in this NFL draft? Welcome, as always, the folks here. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. Thank you for joining us wherever you are. We have Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com. Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus, PFF.com. Jeff, we'll start with you. Brian Flores, many people said when he filed the lawsuit, he would not work again. I think most people meant head coach. Not an assistant coach, but he is an assistant head coach to Mike Tomlin. What's your reaction to this hiring by the Pittsburgh Steelers?
It's not surprising. I don't think he'll be a head coach in the NFL again based on this lawsuit. But, yeah, to get an assistant coaching job is not in any way a shock to me. And, in fact, I think it's a good look for Mike Tomlin and for Brian Flores. This lawsuit can continue with him working in the NFL. And I've told friends of mine over the last couple of weeks who've asked me about this, going back to the Super Bowl when Roger Goodell was asked about this. And I think one thing that is going to help minority hiring is that if people are intentional about it, if they're actually going out and saying, we're going to hire minorities. And as much as people of color are upset about the numbers, we have to be the leaders in this department. And it says a lot that Mike Tomlin has never had a person of color as a coordinator. It says a lot that Brian Flores, when he became a head coach, his first offensive coordinator was Chan Gailey, and his defensive coordinator was white. And so we're going to ask other people to give us opportunities, then we got to make the effort to hire each other. And I say this because, not to say you shouldn't go out and hire the best candidate, but a lot of jobs in the NFL get filled by people who know each other. And there's nothing that says Brian Flores isn't qualified to help the Pittsburgh Steelers be a better defense. I'd like to see him be their defensive coordinator, in fact, because that's where he's made his name. But I don't have an issue with this at all. In fact, I think I like it a lot.
Yeah. Eric, what does it say to you?
Yeah, I agree. I think I think there's obviously racial components to a lot of things, and the reasons why we have not seen a ton of progress in the NFL, or we've seen in fact reverse progress. You'd think in a lot of cases, but I think Jeff hits on maybe one of the reasons why, and it's this way in a lot of places. It's this way when we used to hire professors at the university. It's this way when people like a couple things, like they like to hire people who remind them of themselves, and they like to hire people they're comfortable with. And that's going to lead to a lack of intentionality that is going to hurt progress. And so this is one thing where I can almost guarantee you that Mike Tomlin was not comfortable doing this, right? This couldn't have been necessarily think about when Colin Kaepernick, for example, was certainly one of the best 32 backup quarterbacks in football, but everybody was like, oh, we don't want the distraction or whatever. We don't want this, that, and the other thing. And, I think that's, sometimes you have to invite some of the, what I would consider to be like uncomfortable situations in order to make progress. And that appears to be, what they've done here, which good on them.
Is this Is this a direct reaction? Is this Colin Kaepernick pushing the bar? And without Colin Kaepernick and without all the conversation that came from Colin Kaepernick never getting a quarterback job again, will we not be where we are today? If he hadn't done it, would we have seen Brian Flores being used as the Colin Kaepernick, and it would have taken years of discussion about how he's being blackballed from the coaching community? Did Colin Kaepernick help pave the road for this? Jeff?
I don't think so. I think they're two different situations. Kaepernick, from what I understand, what I've been told, had opportunities to play in the NFL, but they came with some serious questions about what are you going to do when you have a job in the NFL. And so I think the big question was, are you okay? I know he went to Seattle, and Seattle straight up asked him, are you okay with being the backup here? And how are you going to handle, the public protesting situation? And both cases, the answers they got didn't make them happy. And so I've never felt bad for Kaepernick in this way, because I think if he wanted to play football that badly, he could have made those concessions and figure out a way to make it work. Did he change? So I totally applaud what he did in terms of standing up for his beliefs and trying to ultimately leading a movement, but he had opportunities to do this. I think Brian Flores in a situation where he's trying to shed light on a process that he thinks is unfair. He's trying to make people understand there are better ways to go about hiring and creating diversity in the NFL. And that shouldn't be something that we look at in a weird way. Times are different, for one thing. I think Kaepernick certainly was in a place in time that was where people had a much harder time understanding him, and he was not good at articulating himself. I think Brian Flores is very capable of communicating what he wants. And let's face it, he's not playing quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So he's going to be a linebackers coach. We probably can count on all our hands the number of times we've talked to Matt House when he was linebackers coach for the Kansas City Chiefs. So I don't think you're going to hear a lot from Brian Flores. And you probably won't hear a lot about this lawsuit while he's coaching the Pittsburgh Steelers.
The thing that's interesting, I agree with the thing about Kaepernick that was interesting is from what you said, like Kaepernick never did. This sounds bad, but like, because there's tons of players who won't do what it takes to be if the whole deck was stacked against them, they wouldn't do what it takes and they still get a chance. Whether that be because they have the right political beliefs or they have the right skin color or whatever. And Kaepernick was just saying, like, look, like, you need to accept me for who I am. And, the league didn't do that. Right. And, the league accepts a lot of people for who they are, but not certain people. And I think in this instance, like, Flores met the league, 1/4 of the way there or whatever. Right. Like he's stuck with his principles. But to your point about Kaepernick, like, he didn't really want it enough in the way that's sort of the unfair, hey, you have to come to us type of thing. And Flores, to a certain extent, like, came to the NFL a little bit because he obviously likes coaching, right? Like, and so, and Mike Tomlin, to I think a large extent, met the league, maybe halfway there or more or less to get this thing done, which is a drastic difference than what Kaepernick did.
Yeah, I guess, my thought is, would the movement or what he's trying to get accomplished, getting more black head coaches in the NFL, have been better served by him sitting out and drawing attention to the fact that he had back-to-back winning seasons and doesn't have a job, rather than going and taking a linebacker job? And almost, some could say, well, he understands he's got to reprove himself and work his way back up the ladder, right? That's where I get to drawing the Kaepernick comparison. I think you're right, Jeff. I mean, and it's been said, and you put it very well, that he had opportunities to be on a roster, right? He chose not to do it. And I guess my question is, did that advance the movement he wanted further than holding a clipboard behind Russell Wilson for 2 years would have done? It drew attention. It forced conversation, uncomfortable conversations that some people will certainly say it didn't have anything to do with it. He heard the cost. People were talking about Colin Kaepernick, and if he's back in the league, I don't know if those conversations happen. Just as you just said, I don't think we're going to hear much about this lawsuit now that he's back. Would we have heard more if he were sitting around and frankly, for lack of a better term, doing the talk show circuit as an unemployed former head coach?
Yeah, well, I think with Kaepernick, the point I was making was that, looking back on it, it's people forget how much he felt he should be a starting quarterback in the NFL and how much people felt because of his resume he should be a starting quarterback in the NFL. What always drove the conversation about him getting a job was this guy went to a Super Bowl. This guy was, the flavor of the month for a while. Why does he not have a job? And so with Brian Flores, there's a lot of coaches out there who've coached, a couple seasons in the NFL who are not coaching now or who are never having a chance to coach again. There's coaches out there who've won Super Bowls, who've lost their jobs and never had a chance to coach again. And so I think that if Brian Flores had decided to not coach, we would have probably forgotten about him. We wouldn't be talking about him that much. And so I think actually being on a team gives him more of a platform, gives him more opportunity to talk about this. I think somebody asked about how could he not be a distraction. I think Mark asked about here, how could he not be a distraction as this court case continues to be litigated? Well, court cases take a long time to be litigated. Court cases can get really boring over time. See Andy Reid's son. It takes a long time to go through the details and go through all the processes. And most people don't have the attention span to keep paying attention to it. So unless Brian Flores is going to bring this up every time he does an interview or someone asks him every time he does an interview, I think once they're playing football, most of the questions he's going to get are going to be about TJ Watt or Devin Bush or whoever else is he's coaching on the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And so but as far as Kaepernick goes, I think that he gained a lot of traction by not playing, not taking a job, but I've never thought he was that strategic or that intentional in what he was doing. I think he was always of the mindset, if I can't get paid, if I can't be a starting quarterback, I'm not playing. And as a byproduct of that, he became a bigger martyr by not playing.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Eric Bieniemy remains, out there. I'm not sure what the term is. Now, listen, this to me is something that I think you would want to settle down. I've heard conversations about Andy Reid, was taking some time off. Eric Bieniemy wanted to decompress from a season. I get that. But the hiring, there's a reason why owners are jumping in and wanting to get head coaches and wanting to get a staff put together. I mean, that something doesn't jibe there, right? With all these hires and why you don't wait for the Super Bowl guys because you want to get going, you want to build your staff. That would seem to be something that every team would want to do. Meanwhile, the Chiefs and Eric Bieniemy are absolutely in neutral. No commitment to whether or not he will be back. I believe that this will be, I think we've got, and I was having a conversation with a friend of mine this evening, and he brought up a great point to me, and that is, I think we have a deadline. The deadline is the combine, right? Because Andy Reid and Brett Veach are going to have to stand in front of the media, and every question that they answer, instead of like, how's the linebackers look, edge rushers, blah, 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 is going to be, Eric Bieniemy, is he your offensive coordinator? Who's your offensive coordinator? Why haven't you? They're going to get nothing but peppered with this subject. Eric, do you agree that we at least have a deadline, and that is the combine, that there's no way the Chiefs will have no offensive coordinator, and Eric Bieniemy will not either, at least been stated that he's no longer the guy in Kansas City by the time we get to the combine on March 1st?
I think, the last time I was at the combine was the first time that I met Eric Bieniemy, and it was sort of, everything was foregone then. You'd imagine that would be the case, but I'm not sure. Like, I think, I don't know. Like, I think the combine's in a week, like, do we think that, and the Chiefs have gone about a lot of their situations, like, and obviously I'm a fan of the team, like but I'll rip them on stuff. Like, they've done some things where they've kind of sat there and said, hey, nothing's happening here. And I know you guys in the media, do a really good job of pushing them on things, but I don't know, man. I don't think that I don't think it's gonna be resolved. I don't think it's going to be resolved by then, to be honest with you. And does it have to be? Probably, but that doesn't mean it's actually going to happen.
All right, so let's just cover this. Is there any positive to not having an offensive coordinator? They're not the only one. There are a couple other coordinator positions that haven't been filled. They're going pretty quick. But what positive is there to sit around and wait? I continue to be of the mindset that Andy Reid knows exactly what he wants. right? Now, I think you can get into the question. People have said, hey, with the Brian Flores lawsuit, is this a case where ownership is saying, listen, I don't want to be a part of that lawsuit, so we're not firing Eric Bieniemy. We know that there are all kinds of rumblings, and I've pointed out, I think it is completely conspicuous that the quarterback hasn't rallied to his side with a number of tweets and social media statements. He responded to comments about, that he had, somebody alleged, there was a report out there by a San Diego radio station that he had a conversation with his fiance and brother about toning down their social media stuff. He responded to that. Y'all be making things up now, or at least timing wise appeared to be in response to that, which was getting some traction. Again, we're left with nothing to do here but speculate. He seemed to respond to that, yet he has not responded to the Eric Bieniemy situation. I think that's of note. I don't see any way that Andy Reid hasn't known all along what he wants. It's a question of whether or not he can get what he wants. And to me, I don't see any. I really want to hear how dragging something out. We're now, what do we remove now? 4 weeks from their departure, from their end of the season? It's 4 weeks later, and you're not sure about your offensive coordinator?
Well, what do you think he wants? That's the $1 million question here. Yeah, take a sip of that Coors Light.
I wish. Yeah,
Corona Light.
Iced tea. I wish.
Yeah, that's
I wish
right.
I didn't.
Can't say Coors Light when you're a Corona man.
Yeah, no. I thought about that right as we were starting. That I can't run out and grab a beverage, so it's just iced tea. What does he want? Right? I don't know. Let me just say that first and foremost. I haven't spoken to Andy Reid. I don't know. I think he definitely wants Eric Bieniemy to be a head coach in the NFL. I think that ship has really sailed. And so I think they're at a point. I can only speculate on what I see. I don't hear the quarterback rallying to his cause. You cannot get sideways with your quarterback. And I think there was some staleness to the offense. I think there's truth in what was said by the Bengals, that they knew what was coming in the second half. That's a condemnation of all of them, the quarterback, the head coach, the offensive coordinator, not just Eric Bieniemy. I think something needs to change. It's not going to be the quarterback. It's not going to be the head coach. Pure speculation. My guess is he wanted Eric Bieniemy to get a head coaching job, and he wanted to bring in some fresh ideas. I've heard some names circling around, names that are now landing head coordinator jobs in other spots. Now, is that just because those were the popular names and agents are feeding those names out there, and so it's just agent chatter? I don't know. So again, I'll blanket state I don't know what Andy Reid wants, but I think if you wanted him, this is easy. You kick him a 10% raise, he signed, and you're off and down the road. I don't think the longer it takes, the more I think it becomes clear that having Eric Bieniemy back was not choice one.
Yeah. The more I've thought about this, one, it's kind of comical that we're at a point where we're talking about Eric Bieniemy being the worst thing for the Chiefs offense. When his offense is, I know you're not saying that. I'm just saying that that's sort of like it seems to be the public theme that, this offense that has been set records, produced an MVP season, won a championship, it's been the best offense in the history of the Chiefs franchise. That now Eric Bieniemy, they need to have somebody else come in. When in fact, all I've ever heard about this offense is that Mike Kafka was involved in it. Joel Blameyer was involved in it. Bieniemy was involved in it. All these guys had a role in making it what it's become. My feeling about Andy Reid when it comes to his staff is that I've said this many times, he's very loyal. And you can go back to the Bob Sutton situation and see how that played out. And Bob Sutton was in a much worse place when it came to having a foothold on a job in this organization than Eric Bieniemy is now. And Andy Reid spent 2 years holding on to Bob Sutton. When it was clear Bob Sutton had to go, he still spent way more time thinking about the decision than. And so my feeling is that I think Andy Reid cares about what happens to Eric Bieniemy. And Andy Reid wants, as you said, Eric Bieniemy to be a head coach. He wants a good outcome. And I don't think Andy Reid got to this place and just decided, what are we going to do now? I think this has been on his mind for a long time. I think it's been on Bieniemy's mind. And I think they're having really good conversations about this. Like I told you, I spoke to Bieniemy last week, and he seemed like a guy who, was surprised by the rumors and all the stuff in that blog post that got taken down about the relationship there. I feel like Eric Bieniemy, to be honest with you, was probably the toughest coach Patrick Mahomes has ever had in his life. And I say that because he's the guy who had Cliff Kingsbury in college and has had Andy Reid as a head coach here. So do I think that that's hard on Mahomes? Yeah. But do I think that might help Mahomes be a better quarterback in the long run? I think it does help him. And so all this talk about what the quarterback wants, it's a slippery slope to get on. Because if you start looking at it just from the standpoint of, let's just make the quarterback happy all the time, then we're never looking at the quarterback and saying, what are you not doing right? What can you do better?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of, one of my favorite coaches in the NFL right now, to Jeff's point, is Matt LaFleur. I think, LaFleur's getting, I think LaFleur's underrated because they've never won the Super Bowl and they've never even made the Super Bowl with Rodgers. But, as we've seen, I mean, Rodgers is a weird person, okay? And when McCarthy is a Super Bowl winning coach, right? And by the time it got to the end there, he could not control what Aaron Rodgers is doing. And I think one of the things that Matt LaFleur, to me, one of the biggest feathers in his cap is he came in and said, damn it, you're running my offense, right? And it helps the fact that he's competent, that they went from 6-9-1 to 13-3 right away. It helps that he put a good staff in place. It helps. But somebody's got to, Pat's a great quarterback, and he's going to be the franchise quarterback for a decade. And I do agree with you, Petro. The fact that he stood up for his girl and his brother, but hasn't stood up for there is something. I would put money on the fact that there's something there. It's just then the question becomes, can they resolve it, or is he going to take his ball and go home the way that Rodgers took his ball and went home on Mike McCarthy? Because that to me is, I think that's how. And that's not fair to Bieniemy, and that's not fair to, and if Bieniemy isn't doing what's necessary to get to work with Patrick Mahomes, if he's too stubborn, that's not fair to Patrick Mahomes either, right? And that's where I think that this is in a tough position, because maybe the best move is for them to break up, but that doesn't mean anything is solved either, though. If Pat's going to act that way towards an offensive coordinator, he'll act that way towards any offensive coordinator.
Let me read a couple of these. Brett says, if Holmes, and by the way, if you're listening to us via the podcast, we stream live generally on Thursdays because of scheduling. It'll be Tuesday or Thursday with one of our two podcasts. We're broadcasting live Tuesday night, 9 Centrals when we got started tonight. But Brett says, if Mahomes can't get along with Bieniemy, isn't that something to keep an eye on in the future? Hope it doesn't become a theme over Mahomes' career. It is. I think this one from Alan says, if Holmes wants to reach GOAT status, he needs tough coaching, to the point that I think Jeff Chadiha is saying that Eric Bieniemy was giving him, tough coaching. And I agree. And I think it may be wrong and it may be unfair, but it's real. You can't get sideways with your quarterback. And if you're Eric Bieniemy and you want to be a tough coach and you've got his best interest at heart, you've got to find a way to do it without him saying, I don't want to be around you. Right. And that's the thing. And I will come back to, and we're going to get to Aaron Rodgers here in a minute. Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes get together at least once a year, if not a couple of times a year, to shoot these commercials. And you think they don't sit and talk about their situation? I'll forever believe Aaron Rodgers started freaking out when he started hearing that the Chiefs are, keep Patrick Mahomes in the loop on everything. And you think, Patrick Mahomes isn't seeing Aaron Rodgers go, yeah, I ain't playing for this guy, I'm out. And him going, yeah, wait a minute. Hold on, I'm the $500 million guy. I got a little juice here, and I don't really like this guy. And I think it's tough. Listen, Kobe Bryant got sideways with Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson MF'd him in his book, talked about how immature he was. But during the time, he found a way to coach him. And they won, 5 championships together. So, I mean, that's the thing, is you can play the mind games and you can have tough coaching, whatever you want, tough love, be soft, but you got to find a way to connect to the player and at least coexist long enough. And so that is one of the things that Eric Bieniemy, may have made a calculated mistake. And what he did may have been the best coaching Patrick Mahomes could get, but it may also mean the end of his time in Kansas City. I've thought about with what you've said, Jeff, what do I think Andy Reid wants? I think he wants Eric Bieniemy to be a head coach. I think if he's not a head coach, he wants him to be his offensive coordinator. but I think he wants to win, and he knows he needs the quarterback, and he'll do what he has to do to make sure the quarterback is happy. And I'm with Eric. I think it's crystal clear there's at least a bump in the relationship between Bieniemy and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, and the point I'm making is how much of what you saw on the field with Patrick Mahomes this year do you think was the fault of Eric Bieniemy?
Very little.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's like, so why are we spending this much time talking? Now, I agree. I think someone just said, like, if Eric Bieniemy left, they'd find somebody else. I agree with that because it's all about the head coach and the quarterback. Whoever they put in that spot is going to be in the same position. I just feel like it's not fair to spend this much time talking about what Eric Bieniemy meant to this offense. And the real problem is the quarterback had some footwork issues. He had some accuracy issues. He obviously made some struggles in the biggest game of the season. And Andy Reid didn't exactly do a great job in those situations. We don't talk nearly as much about that part of it, which is always going to be the part moving forward, no matter who's running the offense or who has that title of offensive coordinator.
Well, I think that's where this whole thing becomes extremely difficult, right? Because the reason that Andy Reid is not all that, like, shaking in his boots about this situation is that he's the one that controls the offense in his mind, and that's part of the issue. That's the issue, right? Is he doesn't necessarily feel as though he doesn't necessarily feel as though like that position is all that important maybe in his mind, but then that is the self-fulfilling prophecy as to why the guy doesn't get a job ever. You know what I mean? It's it's the tricky part about their situation, in my estimation.
Yeah, I do believe that at some point, though, I think Andy Reid is going to need everybody slips, right? And I thought Dick Vermeil actually did a really good job. He was too loyal to his coaches. Greg Robinson, he kept too long in Kansas City, and then he just kind of and Gunther. I love Gunther Cunningham, but I don't think Gunther Cunningham was the right choice. It was
PFF legend Gunther Cunningham.
I know, just kind of keeping the band together of all that kind of crew of older guys, and they really needed a young mind to come in and freshen things up. And so, but Dick Vermeil was at least willing to turn things over offensively and to bring in and listen to a Mike Martz and give Al Saunders some leeway, because Dick Vermeil was a pretty good offensive guy in his day. And I think Andy Reid at some point, I'm not saying that's today, at some point is going to need that. And that's why I was of the opinion, go get one of these young guys that's been around Sean McVay and has his own ideas. And I think that would be what's best for the football team. And, if that's what Patrick Mahomes needs to connect to as well, then that's what you have to find. I'd like to see Andy Reid manage a game and be the head coach and not be calling all the plays. And I don't for a second believe he's ever not called the plays. I think he's called all the plays. Right. There might have been one or two where he's had to talk to somebody. Hang on, I got to find out about this, or what's going on what injury. Eric, you got the next one, that kind of thing. But I think Andy Reid calls the plays, to Jeff's point. And I think he needs somebody there that can be more of an influence. But I digress. Let's do Aaron Rodgers next, because we could get to the head coaches. I would see where we're going. We're going a long way on this one. Aaron Rodgers, do you know what a panchakarma is?
No.
I'm going to quote, and Jeff actually sent me these quotes. This is from the Pat McAfee show. From Aaron Rodgers. Let me put this disclaimer out there right away for the few people watching that are tuning in just for a specific maybe news and decision. There will be no news today, no decision on my future. As I was texting with you yesterday, I just got out of a 12-day panchakarma, Panchakarma. I have looked it up. I'll tell you in a second. So I'm just getting my head above the sand right now and seeing what's going on out there, but no decision about my future today. Panchakarma. According to the some online dictionary I Googled, a 5-fold detoxification treatment involving massage, herbal therapy, and other procedures. This is what we got today after he goes on and speaks with Pat McAfee, who I don't know if he was oiled up for a bodybuilding competition later or what, but he was
a privilege today.
McAfee.
Yeah.
But you have Wi-Fi when you're doing panchakarma, right? Because he got on his Instagram, right? Wherever his head was under the sand, he could still get on Instagram.
I've never seen more of a look at me moment than that. Like,
No,
I want
he
you to know
sucks.
how advanced and cultured and how deep and zen I am. Come on. Come on.
Well, this is a guy who, and I know, like, you know, we people have various like interests in fitness or whatever, but like he was somebody who back in the day, back when it wasn't like necessarily political or all that kind of thing, he was somebody who did what was called earthing, which is like basically walking outside with bare feet, but like they would say, you know, you were more healthy because you were more in touch with the sun that was emanating through your feet through the grass. So he's a weirdo. And like, and you know, anything that doesn't like actually, you know, anything that does, he's just a weirdo, man. Like, and he'll do the thing like, oh, hey, look, I put Ayn Rand the book behind me because that's what I think people want to see. He'll do stuff like that, but like he's an interesting guy, man. But not interesting in like a like in a like endearing way, and interesting in just like I can't look away way.
So this is the guy who's advising the Kansas City Chiefs quarterback in the State Farm commercial, whispering in his ear about how to conduct life in the NFL.
Yeah, I love this one. This is a phrase I'll throw some. See, Nell Sooner is quoting Mick Schaefer, who works at Eric and I, or Jeff and I are in Kansas City. For those that are listening elsewhere, and Mick Schaefer is the sports anchor for the NBC affiliate here, and he's coined this term about losing people. You know, he's like, we lost Tom Cruise when he went into Scientology. That was it. That's what C.N. Sooner's like. We've lost Aaron Rodgers, Soren. We've lost him, and he'll never return. Not sure we really want him back, truth be told. You know, I don't know that we've lost him, because I think when you lost somebody, they genuinely believe the crap they're peddling. I'm kind of with Eric. I think this is just kind of Rodgers. This is what I want you to think I am. And maybe that's unfair. It seems fake to me. It seems so. I want you to see this. I want you to hear, like Eric said, that the placement of certain books to look like a well-written. Even in one of his comments, read a book, like because you know your reading's just so far out there. I mean, it's just comedic. Like, I don't have anything. Like, just the fact that he went on television to say that he has nothing to say.
Yeah.
That's literally what happened today.
Yeah.
I mean, has the NFL lost him? Has he lost the ability to win football games because he's become so either self-absorbed or out there with his cleansing?
You know, I think he's just, I think, as Eric brought up, there is an aspect of him that I think he's just poking people. I think he does understand how much people are hanging on his every word and how much people are wondering what's going to happen to his future. So I think he's having fun with this now after what happened. I think last offseason, it was pretty much he was pissy and frustrated and was legitimately trying to figure out how can I get out of this situation. I think now it's more so going back to, and I think I go back to some of the statements he made on McAfee's show around the time he was having that COVID-19 controversy and how the woke public and this and that and people. I think he's now just trying to exact some revenge here and just, okay, I'll give you a little something here to ruminate on or something here to think about what I'm going to do. You know, and I've known Aaron a long time. I like Aaron. I think he's a really interesting guy to talk to. I think he is a pretty bright dude. But this whole thing has gotten to a place now, partly because the Packers have mismanaged it. I kind of tune out. I think one of the people said that, like, it's kind of nauseating to kind of keep track of all this stuff now. And I think the best place for him is in Green Bay. I thought that message on Instagram felt like he wanted to leave Green Bay. At this point, I have no idea what he's going to do. But I think I know what I'm going to do is stop trying to read into all his messages. Stop reading. I'm going to stop watching the Pat McAfee show, or you know, time I get something sent to me, I'll just read a few lines and just say, all right, well, in the next 15 days, if Devontae Adams is franchised, we're going to know a lot more about what Aaron Rodgers is going to do. But aside from that, everything else he puts out just feels like a lot of BS.
What's your prediction? What ends up happening if you had to guess?
Everything tells me he should stay in Green Bay, and that the Packers, if they hold on to Devontae Adams and they're able to work that cap number down to where he wants it to be. But really, they put themselves in a position now where he has some leverage. He can say, "I'm not renegotiating." If he says I'm not renegotiating, that cap number stays at $46 million, and they got to move him. And so, I'll go with him staying for now because I think that he's had a lot more fun. People around him have said that about this past year, that he's enjoyed it more than he has any other time. I think the relationship he has with Matt LaFleur is really strong. I think Adams being there would be a statement about what they're going to do moving forward. But I'm not convinced of it. But I think that's probably the best option.
$49 million over the cap, second worst cap situation in the NFL is where the Packers find themselves right now. So if he does want to stick around, certainly. And by the way, that's $49 million over the cap, no Devontae Adams cost.
Yeah.
So people need to understand that
and lost Corey Linsley already, losing both Smith brothers on the outside of the defense. It's not good for them, right? Like it's not an easy thing, and
but it's a bad division.
The bad division thing really helps, right? Like, but here's my question, because like to me, I feel like this is where I kind of am on Rodgers, which is the Packers, to Jeff's point, deserve a fair amount of blame for this idea of, look, both and the Chiefs are here too with Bieniemy and Mahomes, where a divorce is necessary and no one wants to step up and actually do it for the sake of everybody. I'll give Ted Thompson a ton of credit, because when it was time to get rid of Brett Favre, he did. When it was time to, for them to split with Brett Favre, they did it. Right. And then
it took a year. There was a dance, and they played it out one more year. Then the next time.
Yeah, this is going to take longer than that.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Like, Favre never demanded anything. Like, yeah, there was stuff behind the scenes, but when Favre made his decision, and from Jeff Pearlman's book, it was sort of like they were like, "Hey, Brett, let's go. Make a decision now." And when he wanted to waffle, they hung tight, and it didn't look good, right? He was leading the Vikings to a Super Bowl, basically. It wasn't looking great for him, but it's they hung tight there, and they deserve some credit. Whereas I think in this situation, the Packers, like, they were like, "Oh, this is the last dance. This is the last dance. Let's go." And instead of it being the last dance, they decided it was going to be the second to last dance, possibly. And I feel like that's a little bit of an issue.
Retires, pick the team he's going to, or stays with Green Bay. Jeff?
He ain't retiring. I promise you that. He's not going out the way he's gone out the last 3 years, losing the championship game. I think he's going to be in Green Bay. I think they'll find a way to make it work, and they'll try to. They've been kissing his ass all year long. He's got an MVP. I mean, the only other place he could go would be Denver, and maybe Denver wows them. I think what's underrated here and is what's going to be on the quarterback market for the Packers. If he leaves, they got to feel good about their option next year. Is that Jimmy Garoppolo? Is it somebody else of that ilk? They probably can't make a move for a bigger name quarterback or a more expensive quarterback. So I think they're going to do everything they can to keep him there.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Is Aaron Rodgers buddies with Tom Brady? I mean, does he want to hold his towel and personal effects as Tom Brady's the last speaker at the Hall of Fame? There's no way that's going to happen. But I'll throw the Raiders in there as a dark horse, along with the Broncos as a place he could land, because I think if there is any conversation between Brady and Aaron Rodgers, and Brady says, Josh McDaniels the guy you want to play for, right? Like you want to go there. I can see the Raiders because they can send Derek Carr. I mean, that helps alleviate some of the money, and I think could work. I can see a path to him getting to the Raiders when it's all said and done. Eric, what's your call? What happens?
I think he stays in Green Bay or retires. I don't think he goes to another team.
Yeah,
I just like they're even the Raiders, and I agree with you that McDaniel might be somebody who they like and stuff, but like that team sucks.
Yeah.
like if you're Rodgers and you're like, okay, all right, guys, who's my next receiver? They're like, well, it's Brian Edwards, and you're like, oh, cool. Like, okay, you guys had a lot of draft picks for the Khalil Mack trade. How'd those turn out?
Well, you don't think Devontae Adams is going to head wherever Aaron Rodgers heads?
No, I think Devontae Adams comes to Kansas City.
You've lost your mind.
Yeah.
Have we lost Eager?
Yeah.
Who did I text?
That's an interesting math.
Did you lose me? No, like I think Adams. There's always a part of these like old Packer receivers that want to show there's something without Rodgers too, isn't there? And like the only one that ever was a thing with who's ever like performed okay without Rodgers. Jennings sucked when he left. Cobb mostly sucked. Well, Cobb had an okay year with Dallas. James Jones sucked when he left. Jordy Nelson sucked when he left.
They were all old.
Yeah, well, there's that too. But like
Devontae Adams, 31.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody says
you make a perfect chief. You make a perfect chief.
Nobody says he's old right now because he's got Aaron Rodgers throwing to him. But if he goes and has an 800-yard season with 6 touchdowns, they're going to be like, well, he's old now. That's what everybody said about Donovan McNabb when he left the Eagles. It wasn't that Andy Reid was propping him up, and I love Donovan McNabb, but it was that, he got old. Like suddenly he was 33 years old. And he was old as a quarterback at that point. That'll be the narrative if he goes someplace else and sucks.
I could see him with the Raiders, though. I mean, for sure. With him and Derek Carr, old college teammates together again. Yeah. California kid.
Yeah, that works. 9 head coaches have been hired. Ranking them 1 to 9, most wins at this job. You want to go bottom to top or top to bottom?
Top to bottom, be easier. I'll forget some of the names.
Okay. Who wins the most games? Who you got, Eric? Did you actually put? I have an actual list. Did you put a list down, or are you just gonna free flow?
I'm mostly a free flow guy, but I can certainly.
I have a list. We'll go off my list, and you can react to it. I want to go bottom to top. Then if it's gonna go,
you got a number with these names, or you just listing names?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I got 9 to 1.
Oh wow.
In no particular order. Mike McDaniel, Doug Peterson, Josh Daniel, Nathaniel Hackett, Matt Eberflus, Lovie Smith, Dennis Allen, Kevin O'Connell. I think I mentioned Brian Daboll. That's the list. Number 9, Dennis Allen. $76 million over the cap. They are going to blow, and they're going to blow him out when the offense sucks because fans aren't going to come. Dennis Allen ain't winning squat in New Orleans.
Over Lovie Smith for last place, huh?
Yes.
Lovie must be 8 then.
I will tell you 7, 8, 9 are a group that's a tier that is in the end I think will be irrelevant. So I'll give you 8.
I should write this down.
Matt Eberflus of the Bears is at number 8.
Okay.
And number
hold on.
Yeah.
The Bears are worse than Houston.
And number 7,
it's already a weird list.
And number 7 is Lovie Smith. Right? So 9, Dennis Allen, 8, Matt Eberflus with the Bears, Lovie Smith, Houston. The Bears have $29 million in cap room. The Texans have $18 million. Here's my reason. 1, the Saints are a train wreck and have no quarterback and can't get a quarterback. I mean, there's no chance of them winning anything this year. It's going to be awful, right? And everything that they've got is going to be gone. They're going to have to renegotiate, which is going to screw up next year because you're going to have to backload money just to try to get through this year, which will mean next year is going to be a disaster as well. No hope. Matt Eberflus. Notice I've got all 3 defensive guys at the bottom. Matt Eberflus. I'm not a Justin Fields guy. I don't see it with Justin Fields, and I think that's a big big part of the equation. Offensive coordinator Luke Getsy is his OC. I don't see where they're going to play. I don't see where that fixes the quarterback. Lovie Smith, I actually kind of like. I think Lovie will do a good job. I think he's got a program that at least we know he can build a calendar. He can do all those kind of things. And I actually think Davis Mills is a little bit better than people might realize. And if that kind of clicks, I think Lovie Smith's got a little bit better chance. I also don't think the Houston Texans can fire him after 1 year. And I think and after 2 years, he might have them respectable, and the Texans may have to stay the course. Matt Eberflus and Dennis Allen can be fired at any moment, and nobody's going to be worried about being part of the Brian Flores suit. Lovie Smith, I think, is going to get some time.
Here's a question. So can I briefly ask for a second? Because with these three teams, Bears, like if Rodgers leaves, right, that division is terrible.
Yes.
Justin Fields could be the best quarterback in that division, especially if they trade Kirk Cousins, the Vikings, and Rodgers leaves. The New Orleans Saints, who's the favorite in the NFC South?
The Bucs probably still now.
Right? With Blaine, the Blaine train?
I just think Bucs getting.
I think it's the rookie. I think it might be Trask.
Trask is worse than Davis Mills.
Yeah. Or a veteran.
It's Davis Mills.
Yeah.
Okay, because like I think all the three teams you have at the bottom, and again, like this is your list, and I respect it. I respect you. All three of these teams have one thing in common, and that their divisions are terrible.
So you would move all three of them up.
I'm not saying move all three of them up. I'm just saying that like I would put Houston last. Houston is about to trade Laramie Tunsil, Brandon Cooks, and Deshaun Watson, the only three players on that team that have a pulse.
Okay. And to me, I told you my reason. I'm counting on Lovie Smith being there for a few years.
Yeah, I mean, look, he'll win 7 games the next 2 years.
First of all, we're picking nits here. They're all. Yeah. I don't see success for any of them.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a good question, Aaron. Just you talking wins this first year or the whole career?
Very clear. Most wins.
Okay, so that's why Lovey's higher. You think Lovey will be around longer? Yeah. I got you.
Yeah. So that's what. All right. Dennis Allen's maybe 1 year in the door. Like to me, he's the most likely to be canned after 1 year.
Really?
Yeah. Who would you say is the 1 year firing here?
Lovey.
You're going to fire two black coaches in back years after 1 year, and not
you're asking the Houston Texans to make sense.
Fair.
Yeah.
No rebuttal.
That team is a mega church. Not a football team.
That's right. Joel Osteen is the next coach of the Houston Texans.
I have no rebuttal for that. I just think that common sense is you cannot fire a black head coach after 1 year.
I agree you can't. I agree you can't. But you also can't get sideways 1 year into your franchise quarterbacks. And this is before all the massage therapist stuff. You can't get sideways for one, you can't promote Bill O'Brien to GM and then fire him 5 weeks later and then get sideways with your franchise quarterback who you just signed to a big ass deal.
So put Lovey at 9.
They're the worst franchise the NFL has seen in 30 years.
First of all, I'm the only one that put pen to paper. Now you're going to crap on.
I'm not crapping. No. It's right. I respect. Yes, I respect the process, but I'm just saying, Houston, like you are. This is like think about like the Scott Pioli era in Kansas City, crossed with the Malkovich ending in Kansas City, crossed with the. Like
you mean Malkovich, right?
Malkovich, sorry.
It was like John Malkovich.
Malkovich should have played him in a movie, but the across all the dysfunctional things that have ever happened in Chiefs history, and Houston tops all of it.
I got it. Dan Snyder's a train wreck. They still win some games here and there.
My wife texted me that I'm way too loud, so
I got it. So
I want to hear the rest of the list now.
All right, so that's 9, 8, 7. 6, Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings.
That's 6. Wow.
$15 million over the cap. Kirk Cousins. I don't see the quarterback, and if you don't have the quarterback, I don't see where it's going. Right? 5, Brian Dable. Giants taking over the Giants, $11 million over the cap, and he's going to get 1 year. Decide this isn't the quarterback, and then you got to get it right at quarterback. Anyone who doesn't have the quarterback is probably doomed. Right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. Can't believe Cam Dog said
that's a bad division too. So
So it is, because I don't think the Cowboys are any kind of stability, but I do like Ron Rivera. And, so I mean, part of it's like, what coaches are they up against? But I like Brian Dable, but I'm not, I mean, come on. Like, if you don't have a quarterback, it's so hard, and you're not an offensive guy, I'm not going to get on board. Okay, I'm just going with the math of what usually happens in these situations, right? Nathaniel Hackett 4. Obviously, this is the one you could roll the dice and go number 1 and say he gets Aaron Rodgers and you win, 40 games in your first 3 years and you're off and running and have the best chance of being right. I'm like you. I have no idea if he's going to go to Denver. That just seems like, if he doesn't stay in Green Bay, I assume it's someplace we're not thinking of. And that's why I think the Raiders could end up being it. Denver, everyone else has them going to Denver. That just seems too easy. So I don't see it there. So I've got Nathaniel Hackett at 4. Just kind of hedging my bet that maybe Rodgers does end up there. 3 is Josh McDaniels. I think he's got a quarterback. They've got $21 million. By the way, the Broncos have $39 million in cap room. He's got $21 million in cap room. If they sign on to Derek Carr, they'll extend his deal out, create some more cap room, and I do think that they will be very aggressive on wideouts, because I presume Josh McDaniels had wanted quality wideouts in New England, and Bill Belichick would never go get him. So I expect him to be a kid in the candy store and do whatever he can to bring in some wide receiver talent. And so I think they will win games. Number 2, Mike McDaniel with the Dolphins, $64 million in cap room. I'm bigger on Tua than most. I think with an effective running game, it's going to look a lot like what it was, and I think it will be effective. I think he'll get that right. This could blow up in my face and bust if Tua is always hurt, but I got Mike McDaniel too, and Doug Peterson number 1. And I didn't set out with – it's not that I'm on the Doug Peterson bandwagon, but I put Doug Peterson at number 1 because the Jags have $59 million in cap room. They have a young franchise quarterback that I think has talent, and I think Peterson has the Andy Reid program to put in place. I think he falls no worse than middle of the pack in this group. I think he'll have some success there, and he has the best chance of being married up to a quarterback that he has a long relationship. Plus, second stints for coaches, if they're any good, and he did win a Super Bowl the first time, go pretty good. So that's my list. Bottom of the top: New Orleans, Chicago, Houston, Minnesota, the Giants, Denver, and they kind of go in tiers of 3, and then Vegas, Miami, Jacksonville at the top. That's my 9-1.
Okay. I actually don't hate being long on Jacksonville, just because you have a few things that are going for it, right? Like, everybody asks, like, who's the next Cincinnati? And the answer is, generally speaking, like, none. No.
Real quick. Who was on Cincinnati before anybody else?
No, that was you.
Right. I bet them 25-1 to win the division in Feb last year. But yeah, you have your worldview there is good. But, like, you have young quarterback, you have young weapons, all on rookie deals. You have an offensive line that could use some help, but you have cap space through the years. You have a defense that has some talent. And, I think that's part of the formula. And you have a terrible division. The Bengals lucked into a terrible division by virtue of the Bengals, injuries. The Ravens. And Cleveland's quarterback play being so horrendous that, they could luck into that division. But, like, the Jags have that, like, a priori here. Like, this division's terrible, and they really do have a shot. So I don't mind that at all, actually. The Jacksonville one. The interesting one for me is you said Minnesota below Vegas, where Minnesota and Vegas are like the Spider-Man meme. They're the same team.
Except for one has a quarterback that they're content to live with and actually shows up and does all the drills and hangs with the fellas. And the other one's got a guy who puts in the bare minimum in the Vikings and Kirk Cousins. Like, you wouldn't rather have Derek Carr over Kirk Cousins?
Jeff, what would you rather? I think
just throwing of the football, I think they're the same guy. As far as getting a team to move forward, I'll take Derek Carr over Kirk Cousins.
I think Derek Carr is more inspirational. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah,
I think almost everybody in the league views Carr that way. And I think if you put Justin Jefferson on the Raiders, you get a lot better production out of Carr than what Cousins has had with Jefferson on the Vikings. But both rosters suck out loud. Both coaching staffs are basically the same. You have an offensive coordinator guy coming in. The division for the Raiders is harder than the division for the Vikings. So, like, to me, I think that that's maybe where you can gather a few. You can run up the score a little bit if you're the Vikings, facing the Lions and Bears.
Who's going to have their job longer, Josh McDaniel or
Kevin O'Connell?
If history's any indication, Kevin O'Connell, because of the way that the Wilfs kind of just they fly over to New Jersey and do increasingly sketchy, realtor deals, and they mostly leave those guys alone.
And you don't think that, like, John Gruden was going to have 8 years with the Raiders if he didn't screw it up with his past transgressions?
Yeah, but that's John Gruden. That's not Josh McDaniel. Josh McDaniel, the last time he had his turn at the dish, lasted a year and a half.
That's fair. I listen. That's a fair point. I expect him to do a lot better the second time around, just as Bill Belichick did a lot better the second time around. So, what's yours?
Okay. And the paper.
Yeah, just throw a hate on picks. Make a pick.
Yeah.
I like Jacksonville in one of those top spots.
One of the top spots. How about this? You make your list, and we'll review it next week.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah. I'm not even. And like I said, I hesitant to go after your list because you put in the list and checked it twice. But those are just my opinions, like, upon first watch.
And I like the idea of doing it now, because then when we see the quarterbacks where they all land, I think to redo it. Obviously, if Aaron Rodgers is a Bronco, we're going to throw, Nathaniel Hackett's going to go to the top of the list. If the Raiders swing a deal for Rodgers, you're going to bring that up. The Raiders swing a deal for Russell Wilson. Like, where those guys, if Jimmy Garoppolo lands somewhere, like, what happens with the quarterbacks? Isn't that going to, like, that's why I want to get us on the record right now, and then let's review it after the quarterback shuffle, the draft, and free agency are done, and see how different it is. Like, I want to get it on the record, and then I want to forget about it, and then I want to redo it right before the season, and I want to see how different it is and see how much our opinions. Because I think it's interesting that, like, right now, like, we talked about this on the radio show, let me find it, because Curtis looked it up. ESPN did a thing where they had a bunch of their experts predict the conference champions and the Super Bowl champion for next year. And it came out the way it worked out. It was, a list of, I think, 12 of them. In the AFC, 7 Bills, 4 Chiefs, 1 Chargers. Right? In the NFC, 4 Packers. They're clearly counting on the Packers to be there. To have Aaron Rodgers, 3 49ers, 3 Cowboys, 2 Rams. Super Bowl champs, 5 Bills, 4 Chiefs. Right? I think it's significant that the Bills were 7 of them had conference championships. 5 of those that had them as conference championships had them win it. All 4 that had the Chiefs as conference championships had them win it. Then 1 for the Niners, 1 for the Packers, and 1 for the Chargers as far as winning the Super Bowl. That reflects the betting market, right? The 2 favorites are the Bills and Chiefs, because you've got the quarterbacks and you've got coaches and you've got frameworks of good teams, right? Like, how different is that going to be, though, if Aaron Rodgers lands with the Broncos, right? If Russell Wilson is a Raider, or, one of these different things, it will change tremendously. I think it's just a good exercise in how much our view of a team will change based upon who's throwing the ball. Like, is there anyone in here that you like? Yeah. Is there any one of the 9 guys that you would say, stud? We're talking about a guy who's going to win minimum 100 games at this job.
Well, Peterson is the one that makes the most sense there. I mean, he's the one who actually has a championship. I'm not as high on Jacksonville as you guys are. I think that they've had cap space before. They've been a train wreck. They've made bad decisions. So I'm not as sold on the quarterback either. I think he has talent. I think he has potential, but I don't see the same things in him that I saw in Joe Burrow or Mahomes, or partly because he's had an easier ride than those players had. I think I'm always more skeptical of guys who've started off top of the food chain and just keep rising up. I think that it's going to be a lot harder for him when he begins to struggle. We'll know more about who he is. But I think if you ask. I didn't put my list together either, but I would put Josh McDaniels at the top of the list. I would put Mike McDaniel second. I would put Nathaniel Hackett third and Kevin O'Connell fourth, just based on what those teams have talent-wise, what I think you can have a quarterback plug-and-play there. And then I would probably put Peterson 5th and Dable 6th, and then I'd take your last 3 guys.
You think the bottom is the bottom? You think that
bottom's the bottom? I think, yeah. I mean, I think Texans is probably the worst team, but yeah, I could easily see all 3 of those guys being bad. And so I think you're talking about really very small variations in who's going to be the better coach.
Yeah, I think that's why I say the tier thing, like arguing over the bottom 3. I don't really care.
Yeah.
Unless somebody thinks that one of those 3 is going to be a rock star. Okay, I'm all ears. I want to hear that because I think they're all doomed, right? And Matt Eberflus is the one that I may be wrong. I mean, that might be, the one that he's like a much better coach than I realize, and he's the new Bill Belichick or Mike Tomlin that totally gets it and has the game plan. I'll freely admit that. I don't see any.
The only thing I'll say about Eberflus that I think is underrated is that you look at what Sean McDermott meant for Josh Allen. I think defensive coaches can look at guys who have unorthodox skill sets and know how to use them best, and they get coaches to use them. I think that's what Sean McDermott's greatest gift to Buffalo was saying, let's get an offensive coordinator in here who knows how to get the most out of Josh Allen, who's a raw talent. Instead of saying, hey, let's put this quarterback into the system that I think is great, work for Patrick Mahomes and did all this great stuff. I think having an offensive coach like that who wants to make a name off a quarterback like Justin Fields is a mistake. So I think that move was smart for the Bears.
28 episodes of Too Deep, 28 times we have not gotten to all of our topics. Why? Because we simply go too deep. That's the bottom of where it is. We'll get to the other topics next week. So thank you very much for joining us. If you could, hit the like button, the love button, the thumbs up button, whatever buttons there are in all these different formats. Again, we stream live, usually Tuesday or Thursday. We'll get back into our rhythm. We're going to do Too Deep once a week. We're going to do Red, Gold, and Bold once a week. And so we appreciate all the positive feedback that we can get from you. Send it out to your friends. Got a lot of people listening all over the world, and we do thank you for listening and watching us when we stream live like tonight right here with the 2D podcast. So for Jeff Chadiha from NFL Network, Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus, I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB saying thank you for joining us here on 2D.